Could you give like a brief introduction of what the planche is?
So the planche is supporting the body on the hands with straight arms in a horizontal chest down position. Think of a push-up position with your feet just hovering above the ground.
What muscles specifically or muscle groups are used with the planche exercise?
Primary muscles working in the planche are the shoulder flexors. Your shoulders need to be able to generate enough force to keep your body off the ground, stop your shoulders from extending and moving back towards that dip position. Your anterior deltoid, your clavicular head of your pecs, the long head of your biceps. But your long head of biceps crosses your shoulder joint and works as a shoulder flexor, especially in supinated positions.
And everyone listening, that is the secret behind Cy Monster's incredible biceps. It's not from his pulling prowess, it's from those planche gains.
Moving down the chain in the full planche, we need to be able to keep our body extended. And the way we do that in this chest down horizontal position is with our posterior chain muscles. So with our back extensors, our hip extensors, so our rectus spinae muscles, our glutes.
What's the best way for people to start in terms of the basic progressions?
So a tuck planche is probably accessible to quite strong individuals who have a very good foundation. So people who can do a lot of push-ups, have done some sort of basic bodyweight training, things like L-sits, they may be able to do a tuck planche on the floor. But I would say more commonly, especially for people who don't have a foundation in calisthenics, a tuck planche isn't accessible. And you can regress that further by doing things like a planche lean or a pseudo planche, it's sometimes referred to. So what that is starting in a push-up position and just leaning your shoulders in front of your hands. What that's going to do is force you to flex your shoulders isometrically to stop you from falling on your face, which simulates the action used in a planche. And the further you lean, the harder it gets. So that's a great way to progress towards the tuck planche or build shoulder strength towards that. You can also work on the constituent muscles that are used in the tuck planche, some scapular depression and some scapular protraction to lift the body as high as possible. So you can work on those with things like scapular dips or scapular push-ups. Tuck planche also requires pretty good compression from the abs and hip flexors. So you can do things like tuck sit lifts, hanging leg lifts, L-sits, they'll all help build that strength. And doing things like elevated tuck planche holds provides the best path to unlocking the tuck planche. If you try to do a tuck planche on the floor and you can't lift your feet off the ground, very common, what you can do is lift your hands or raise your hands a certain level to make that movement accessible. So you might put a yoga block under each hand. With that, you might be able to just get your feet and your knees off the ground and hold that for 15 seconds. As you get stronger, reduce the height to say a couple of phone books until you can do the movement on the floor. This makes the movement accessible to anybody who can hold the top position of a dip. Let's just go back to planche 101.
Sure, go for it.
So with weight training, you progress the difficulty by increasing weight. With the planche, you're not changing the amount of weight you lift. You're always lifting your body weight, but you're increasing the intensity by manipulating a lever arm or manipulating torque. So a good analogy for this is if you think about holding a stick with a weight on it and putting the weight right at your hand, that will be fairly easy to hold. As you move the weight further and further down the stick away from your hand, the torque increases, although the weight hasn't increased, and it's harder to hold that stick horizontal. So the planche has the same principles as that to increase the intensity. So you start with tuck positions once they're accessible, and then you progress through longer lever arms until you reach the full planche. And a tuck planche on the floor, so just being able to get your feet off the ground, isn't actually a 90-degree position. If you look at a tuck planche, the first level of a tuck planche, feet just off the ground, an inch off the ground, your body's going to be angled, your hips will be below your shoulders. So that's going to be easier than holding it horizontal. But then to keep it objective, to be able to monitor it, measure it, and manipulate it as you work towards the horizontal tuck planche where your hips and shoulders are level, now you put a yoga block under your knees. You have to now hold the tuck planche with your legs just above the yoga block. They're not allowed to touch it. So this increases the intensity because it's moving you closer to 90 degrees. Then once you can hold the tuck planche with the hips and shoulders level, then you can start working through longer lever arms, advanced tuck, straddle, full.
That's a really interesting observation. I've actually never heard anyone break it down like that.
The change in intensity between a tuck with your legs just off the ground and the tuck with your hips and shoulders level is pretty drastic.
What would you say is the universal form that people should be applying for planche-related exercise?
I like to turn my hands to the side, so hands shoulder width apart, to allow you to lean forward without putting stress on your wrists. So if your fingers are facing forward, you're gonna jam up the back of your wrists. It'll be quite painful. You can get an injury, especially with the amount of volume you have to do to achieve the planche. Alternatively, you can use parallettes.
Okay.
Elbow creases facing forward. So externally rotate the shoulder to make your elbow creases point forward. You want to be protracting or pushing tall through the shoulder blades. So you want to lift your body as high as you can off the floor. When I say protracting, I mean through the shoulder blades and not the spine. So a lot of times you see planche, you might see people have this kind of hunchback posture. I would rather keep a perfectly straight spine and just isolate that to the shoulder blades. And then moving down the chain, you want to have basically a straight body from your shoulders to your toes, head in a neutral position or looking forward. If you look at any of the top guys doing planche, you'll see very rarely do they have a perfectly flat lower back. So I like to have the intention of a posterior pelvic tilt, but set the standard of a neutral lumbar spine. No more arch than you have it at neutral. If you try a reverse hyper exercise, extending your hips against gravity, it's very difficult to do that and achieve a straight line posture with a perfectly flat lower back.
How and why would you use bands for people training planche?
Bands are something that often get used because they seem technical and they're a bit of fun. Bands aren't essential. I think they're a great tool to use to help you bridge the gap between levels. So you can absolutely achieve a planche without bands. You can hold the tuck planche for 30 seconds. You can't hold the advanced tuck at all. How do I bridge that gap? Well, one really good way to bridge that gap is to move to the advanced tuck with assistance from a band. That gives you an objective amount of assistance every time. It's much better than you or myself spotting that person. And you build capacity with a band. You use thinner bands as you get stronger until you can hold the advanced tuck unassisted. Use the same approach to move to straddle and to full. If you're bored training the straddle planche, I just want to feel the full planche, you can throw a band on. That can give you some extra motivation, help you approach your training with an increased intensity, some more drive, which can be really useful for strength gains.
The planche progressions and also the pseudo planche lean, what would you recommend? Is it one is better than the other? Because I've heard some people say you only need to do the planche progressions, tuck, advanced, all the way to full. Or some people recommend, because the planche is about getting your hands underneath your center of mass, just doing your pseudo planche leans is going to be a good way to progress.
You don't have to pick one or the other. So I would say the best option is probably to do your tuck planche holds, your straddle planche holds, working at whatever intensity you can, and then supplement that with some extra volume of planche leans. So you look at a bodybuilder training chest in the gym, they don't go in and they don't argue about, should I do bench press or should I do flies? I'm sure they do argue, but but you know, it's not you can only do bench press or you can only do flies.
Yeah.
You can do both. A general rule is exercise order should reflect your goals. The most important exercises should be done early in the session when you're fresh.
When did you start training the planche for the first time, and how long did it take you to get to straddle planche?
I kind of had a background with some sort of planche exercises through breakdancing. It probably took me about 2 years to achieve the planche, to achieve the full planche. So if you have a very good base of strength, you're really good at dips, pull-ups, L-sits, standard bodyweight strength. About a year for the straddle planche, 2 to 3 years for the full planche is probably a good estimation.
Do you notice a difference with people that have a base compared to those that don't in terms of time frames for planche?
Absolutely. So I think if you can't do pull-ups, and although pull-ups are completely unrelated to the planche, they're different muscles, opposing muscles, I've never seen somebody who can hold a planche who can't do pull-ups. So having a general base of strength is really useful. The more muscle mass you have in the relevant muscles is going to increase your potential towards the planche. However, it all comes down to specificity. Even if you can anterior dumbbell raise a great deal of weight, you're world class in that. If you don't do specific planche training, you're probably not going to be able to do the planche.
What would you say is the most important thing that people could leave with from your perspective?
Consistency, especially as a beginner when you're trying to chase every skill. I want the front lever, the planche, the one-arm pull-up, the handstand push-up, the 90-degree push-up. You can spend a little bit of time training this, a little bit of time training that. That doesn't give your body the best conditions to adapt and to get stronger with a particular set of exercises. So stay consistent. I like to stick with exercises for a certain period of time, so say 8 weeks or so, to allow the body to progress and allow you to overload with those exercises, give the body a chance to adapt. As long as you're progressing, you can keep that program, do that indefinitely, ride the wave. If you stop progressing, if you lose motivation, your goals change, then you can change up your program. But I think keep it simple, focus on a few things at a time. and stay consistent.
Perfect. Awesome, man.
Based on today's video, did you learn something new? Are you going to change the way you train calisthenics now or into the future? Let's have a discussion in the comment section. Otherwise, go to fitnessfaqs.com for the best calisthenics workout programs, and I'll see you all very soon.